Brethren, you have been called to liberty, only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. This is the principle. You have been called to liberty, only do not use that liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. Paul was willing to sacrifice his freedom to avoid giving offense in order to help build up new Christians into maturity. He was willing to sacrifice his liberty if it was for love, if it was for building up the church into holiness, if it helped Christians grow faster, something that was a freedom point, something he was free or to do or not to do, he was willing to lay it down in order to build up the church. But if anybody came along and started demanding it, you have to do this to be saved, you have to do this to have fellowship here in our church, Paul drew a fierce line and called that a yoke of bondage, and then, being in one of his more winsome moods, wrote that he wished those who made that kind of trouble would just go all the way and castrate themselves. Right? So Paul felt strongly about this, let's say, right? This is a big deal. But it's a big deal both ways. When it came to him being able to minister more freely, and there was no mandate coming down, there was no demand that you do it in order to be saved, but Paul could look at it and say, this is going to be confusing to people, this is going to get in the way, and I want to be able to tell them what the Jerusalem Council decided, but I don't want it to get in the way of the gospel. I just want them to grow in Christ. Timothy, let's just take this off the table. He was willing to do that for love. He was willing to do that to be edifying, though we know from elsewhere that he would have been willing to say absolutely not if someone was saying, you have to do this or you're not saved. You have to do this or it's not really Christianity. He would have thrown down. But this decision with Timothy really is remarkable. It's really remarkable. It goes against everything in our flesh. And no doubt, a bunch of the really based bros, a bunch of the really, those who are really enlightened, the red-pilled, all the people that had been following all the controversy online, no doubt a whole bunch of them would have snickered amongst themselves and said things like, okay, boomer, right? Obviously, Paul, you're getting a little old. You're losing your edge. That was a really cool thing what you did with the Jerusalem Council, going toe-to-toe with them, but clearly you're kind of losing it. Right? Because everything in you thinks, Paul, this is your chance to drive it home. You don't have to get circumcised. You don't have to bow to those cranky Jews. You don't have to bow to those Judaizers. And Paul says, I know I don't. But I can love them. I don't have to. That's the thing to underline here. This is the thing to underline, right? He didn't have to do it. And that's why he felt freedom to do it. Paul was not losing his edge. Paul was demonstrating that he understood the wisdom of the gospel. Christ crucified. God didn't have to do it. Christ crucified. Freely laid his life down. Freely took upon himself our guilt, our shame, our sin. To win. To save. He laid down his rights. Philippians 2 says he humbled himself. He humbled himself not only to the form of a servant, not only to the form of a slave, but even to the point of death, a humiliating death on the cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and given a name that is above every name. He didn't have to do it. And circumcision's no little painless thing. It might have crossed Timothy's mind, well, it's easy for you to say, Paul. No. It was kind of a big deal. Painful. Trouble. Difficult. And Paul was willing, happy even, to lay down freedom, comfort, for the sake of the gospel. Can I win more people to Christ? I think I can. Let's go this way.